Today, I'm announcing the United States is targeting the main artery of Russia's economy. We're banning all imports of Russian oil and gas and energy. That means Russian oil will no longer be acceptable at U.S. ports, and the American people will deal another powerful blow to Putin's war machine. The decision today is not without cost here at home. I'm going to do everything I can to minimize Putin's price hike here at home.
That was American President Joe Biden after weeks of continued Russian aggression towards Ukraine. Washington is stepping up its economic sanctions on Moscow by stopping all imports of oil and natural gas. As a result, the price of crude oil topped $130 a barrel as reportedly steered clear of Russian crude, causing further supply shocks.
In the Philippines, the Department of Energy says there's always a possibility that pump prices will hit 100 pesos per liter. This as industry experts talk of a possible two-digit increase next week. Time for today's biggest headlines. I'm Gretchen Ho.
I'm Robbie Alampay. You're watching The Big Story. It's more or less a done deal. Expect fuel prices to get jacked up again as the conflict in Eastern Europe shows no signs of slowing down. Add to that the U.S. oil import ban on Russia.
Question is, by how much exactly are pump prices expected to increase? For those updates, we talk via Zoom to News 5 correspondent Shaila Francisco. Shaila, good evening. Some posts online are already showing a possible 12 peso increase. Is that true?
Gretchen, well, some industry sources say it can even go as high as 13 pesos per liter for diesel, while gas prices may surge by 8 pesos per liter. This comes as oil prices in the world market reach its highest level since 2008 on Monday amid the oil import ban by U.S. on Russia. But the Energy Department clarifies nothing's set in stone yet. After all, they've only accounted for 2 of 5 trading days. They're also on wait-and-see mode as to how prices will fare for the next 3 days to fully determine what the increase will be next week. So it may be lower than 12 pesos, but there's also a possibility of that going higher. And in relation to that, Petrogas will implement a rollback beginning 6 a.m. tomorrow, March 10, until 11:59 p.m. of March 13. They say this is to minimize the impact on consumers, especially with the looming price increase next week. Gretchen, Robbie?
Shaila, how are motorists taking this series of massive hikes? Ano na ba ang diskarte ng mga motorista?
Robbie, some consumers are now strategizing to save up. Others I've seen are stocking up on fuel as early as now, while others are buying ahead through the application called Price Lock. Now, this allows someone to buy fuel at the current price and load it up later once price increases take effect. Some motorists say they even get to save as much as 12 pesos per liter using the app. We were able to talk to one of its users, and here's what she had to say.
Sobrang laking tipid sa akin, lalo na sa trabaho. Pag nakakagala ako, kahit less hassle. Mas madali siya pagka bumabiyahe ako. Mamimili ka kung sang station, mas mura. Then dun ka pipiliin mo kung ano yung ikakarga mo. Bala ko pa rin bukas is makabili ulit para mas malaki yung matipid ko. Compare sa sunod na kung lalaki pa siya.
Robbie, the Energy Department clarifies there is nothing wrong with stocking up on fuel, but they advise against panic buying and hoarding as this could disrupt local supply and may create a possible or a temporary shortage of fuel. Robbie, Gretchen?
Shaila, you've spoken to people on the ground. What about the private sector? How are they bracing for the impact of the increasing prices of fuel?
Gretchen, well, earlier today, Metro Pacific Chairman Manny V. Pangilinan did speak to the media, and he gave an honest assessment on how the current crisis may affect their businesses. One that could be heavily hit is the tollways business, as rising fuel costs may mean lower volume of vehicles. Now, for Meralco, he says Meralco's revenue and bottom line may not be directly affected, but it could impact the demand for power. Let's listen in on his assessment on how it will affect the other businesses.
It could impact on the demand for electricity if power rates go up. PILIPINO mining will be a beneficiary because you know that metal prices have as well been impacted by overall geopolitical situations. I think very little impact on water. On telco, not much, because most of our revenues are driven by domestic demand.
Maraming salamat, Shaila Francisco, reporting live from Taguig. It is not just the jeepney drivers that are facing the brunt of the oil price hike. Some commuters have complained of drivers overcharging.
The LTFRB warns drivers not to overcharge or else they could face a fine of as much as 5,000 pesos. Mobile journalist Yeda Pascual gives us a front seat to this story.
Pending government's decision to hike fares, some jeepney drivers have allegedly decided to charge or if not, keep the change instead. For some passengers, they are okay with this.
Kung ang pamasahe ko mula Baclaran hanggang dito ay 12, pwede na po siguro yung 15. Huwag naman po yung buong 20 pesos.
Malaki na rin kasi yung ngayon bayarin sa gasolina. Kaya pabor din sa akin na ganun kahit na hindi na ibalik yun sa kulay.
But the LTFRB has a warning to jeepney drivers.
Wala naman kasing problema kung kusang binibigay po ng ating mga commuters na nakakaintindi. Pero po yung kapag hindi po nagsusukli yung ating mga drivers ay overcharging po ang magiging offense po niya.
If caught, jeepney drivers may have to pay a fine of 5 to 15,000 pesos. The vehicle can also be impounded or the jeepney franchise cancelled. For commuters who want to complain, they may call the LTFRB hotline at 1342. But for jeepney drivers in multinational Parañaque, they say they do not resort to this.
Nagsasoli po kami, Navy pa rin pasahe namin. Navy pa rin kami dito sa multinational. Hindi kami nagtaas ng pasahe. Yung ibang mga pasahero, hindi nila kinakuha ang 10 dahil alam nila na wala nang kinikita kami rito.
Still, they call on the government to act immediately on the fare increase petition.
Kailangan po namin ng konting dagdag. Tapos na po kami sa sobrang mahal ng presyo ng diesel. Halos wala na kayo may uuwi.
For some commuters and drivers alike, raising fare rates requires a good balancing act because regardless of what seat you take, be it that of the drivers or the passengers, everyone is bound to be affected. Mobile journalist Yeda Pascual, We Are One News.
These are the other big stories tonight. Prices of goods will remain stable for now as the Department of Trade and Industry sees a minimal impact on the market amid the ongoing Ukraine-Russia crisis. Provincial bus routes reopen, but some operators complain over the use of only a select set of terminals. And children understand more than what we give them credit for. Find out how the news of rising oil prices is affecting this little girl from Batangas. These big stories after the break.
watching The Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay.
And I'm Gretchen Ho. The Trade Department assures that prices of goods in the market will remain stable for now.
But Trade Secretary Mon Lopez cautions against ruling out any possibility of price increases. Mobile journalist Pamela Vasquez has the story.
The ongoing conflict is expected to have minimal impact on trade with the Philippines. But DTI Secretary Mon Lopez warns that food and mineral prices are likely to go up.
Nakikita na natin ngayon yung presyo ng oil, ng wheat, ng corn, iron ore, naapektuhan na sa buong mundo.
Russia and Ukraine are two of the world's largest producers of wheat. But for now, the Trade Department says no price adjustments will be made on basic goods like bread because there's enough inventory.
Assumption po natin dyan, yung mga manufacturers po natin were able to produce these products and will continue to produce these products over the next 3 months using inputs that they purchased na hindi pa nangyari yung gulo o yung sunod-sunod na pagtaas ng presyo ng fuel.
Trade between the Philippines and Ukraine and Russia is quite small. According to Lopez, Ukraine is only the country's 48th trading partner, while Russia sits at 27th place. The total trade between those two countries and us does not even reach $1 billion a year.
They account for about 1/2 of 1%. So wala pang 1% of Philippine trade. So ganun kaliit lamang yon.
From Russia, we mostly import iron, steel, and vaccines. There's been no indication that the Philippines will impose sanctions on Russia like Western countries did. Lopez says they're also working with NEDA and other agencies to reduce the price of coal, which is still our biggest power source. Mobile journalist Pamela Vasquez, We Are One News.
Is there a need to raise the suggested retail prices of goods? That big question and more with Philippine Amalgamated Supermarkets Association President Mr. Steven Cua. Mr. Cua, welcome to The Big Story. Nakamute pa po yata kayo.
There we go. Sorry.
Okay lang po. Good evening po.
Good evening, Robbie.
Mr. Cua, so far we've been talking about the price of fuel, the price of transportation, but all of that, what does that redound to? What does it all mean for consumer goods?
Well, the fear, kumbaga, struck in the hearts of business people, it has sort of accelerated the decision of management of the manufacturers to increase prices of certain goods starting March 1. Nag-umpisa na medyo nag-ataasan ng prices of goods.
Which in particular?
Okay. For the basic and kumbaga basic necessities and prime commodities, konti lang naman. Around 4 to 6% siguro ang average increase for those items which have increased. There's coffee, there's milk, powdered milk, yung pala medyo gumalaw, fresh milk. And then for the non-essentials, medyo malaki, from 8 to around 15%, lalo na yung mga imported, ang sangkap. Medyo gumalaw na.
Yeah, pero kanina po, napag-usapan natin ang tinapay, nabanggit kanina sa news report natin ng DTI. Ukraine, of course, a major exporter and producer of wheat. But they're confident that sabi na for the next 3 months, supply should be okay, therefore prices should be okay. Is that a reasonable expectation?
Now, the list of SRPs na listahan ng DTI is just a very small portion of all the items carried. Remember that the brands there and certain sizes yun. So what manufacturers probably do is those not in the list, ang medyo ginalaw nila ng konti ang margins or increased in prices. So there have been some items which have already increased in price. But again, if you are a smart buyer, shopper, you probably be able to dodge the increases and go to the items which have not yet increased.
Mr. Cua, one last question. What's a smart buyer? What's a smart consumer? Any tips? What can people do?
Okay, if you shop every week or every 3 times a week, at least have a list of your top 30 items that you buy, twice a week or weekly, I mean, that way, alam mo pag tumaas ang presyo ng paborito mong brand, which you can shift naman to another brand, another size, or a substitute product, di ba? You need not buy the items which, wherein na nag-increase ang price. Kasi, as long as you know the prices of the items that you buy regularly. But if you don't know any better, then, you're going to be a big victim of price increases. So, as a smart buyer, medyo alam mo naman ng kaunti, di lahat ng items na bibili mo, those that you regularly buy, which eat up the chunk of your budget.
Okay, Mr. Guo, maraming salamat po. That was Philippine Amalgamated Supermarkets Association President, Mr. Steven Kua.
Bilang Pilipino, bilang Pilipino.
The newly appointed COMELEC commissioners officially start work today as the body conducts its first on-bank session. First on its agenda is its fact-checking deal with Rappler. Mobile journalist Jacob Lazaro has the report.
The Commission on Elections finally conducted its first on-bank session with a full set of commissioners. Newly appointed COMELEC Chairman Saidamin Pangudangan took over the reins of the commission. With him, two new commissioners, George Garcia and Aimee Neri.
I stand before you today as a defender of democracy, who will be independent and conscientious in giving life to the fundamental freedom of suffrage.
Pangudangan is the second Muslim to chair the commission after recently retired former chairman Sheriff Abbas. Commissioner Aimee Neri attended the session physically, while Commissioner George Garcia attended via Zoom, as he was still filing his withdrawal from all the cases he is currently handling.
We will advocate and ensure that we will have an honest, fair, and free conduct of election.
The COMELEC officials stood pat on their decision to tap online news site Rappler for its fact-checking initiative. COMELEC temporarily suspended its agreement with Rappler after the Solicitor General filed a case against it in the Supreme Court.
Simply suspending the implementation of the memorandum agreement. We're not abrogating it.
The Commission is also going to continue demolition of illegal campaign materials on public property. The High Tribunal stopped the COMELEC's Oplan Baklas for dismantling campaign materials on private property because of questions over freedom of expression. Mobile journalist Jacob Lazaro, we are One News.
The rising price of fuel products is definitely a concern for commuters and transport groups, but who says children don't understand what's happening?
That's right. This little girl from Batangas knew full well the value of every drop of oil when they made a quick stop for gas. 4-year-old Casey Larida can't help but ask on the pump attendant to make sure that every drop of gasoline was placed inside their car.
The attendant, of course, could not help but laugh at what Casey had to say.
Sos Mariosep, ay hanggang may pumapatak, kuya, ay huwag niyo hong aalsain. Diyos ko po, huwag niyo hong aalsain, parang awa niyo na.
Ay, sus Mariosep, Diyos ko po!
Oo, tak-tak.
Totoo naman.
Nakalimutan tumaktak.
Ay, talaga naman.
Naalala ko nung bata ako, ganyan ako.
Ay, talaga?
Oo.
Okay.
Akala mo, pati nung tumanda na ako, kahit na may an empty tank na, iginugo ko pa rin tapos tigbo 100 ang...
Pero ngayon talagang damang-dama natin. Hanggang kay Casey, di ba? Talagang hindi mo maiiwasan.
Speaking of being a smart buyer, dito naman, kailangan smart gas consumer ka, I guess. Ang turo sa akin, wag ka masyadong umapak sa gas. Kailangan yung speed mo, lang, saktuhan lang. So, wag magmamadali sa biyahe. That's a tip. So you can save up on gas. But time for another quick break. More of the big stories when we return.
You're still watching The Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay.
And I'm Gretchen Ho. After months of hard lockdown, the LTFRB has reopened more provincial bus routes for interregional travel.
But some operators are complaining of the use of only select terminals. Jenny Dongon with the rest of the story.
Traveling from Bataan to Cavite only used to take 7 hours for Godoy. Back then, he can get a bus along Araneta to make his way to Cavite. But following the LTFRB suspension of that route during the pandemic, he still had to make his way to PITX in Parañaque in order to get a bus to Cavite.
Hassle po kasi ang dami pong sasakyan ulit eh. Imbis na isang sakay na lang sana.
But his dilemma is bound to change. The LTFRB is opening more routes and terminals for provincial buses. This covers public buses with valid franchises, certificate of public convenience, provisional authority, and special permits. Buses from CALABARZON will be allowed at the ARANETA bus terminal in Cubao via C5. Those coming from QUEZON, MIMAROPA, and BICOL will still use PITX as their endpoint. Those from Region 1 and the Cordilleras can only drop off passengers at the North Luzon Express Terminal, while those from Region 3 are allowed in Araneta and Inlet in Bukawi. Visayas and Mindanao buses are allowed at the Santa Rosa Integrated Terminal. But some bus operators are not exactly happy with the development. Their issue, why do they have to use the Araneta bus terminal and not their own terminal along EDSA?
Singil nila dyan, 8% ng revenue mo kukunin nila. Eh, napakamahal na ng krudo. Ang kikita na lang yung terminal. Yung operator, malulugi lalo.
Meanwhile, of course, we continue to follow updates on Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Russia has declared a temporary ceasefire for civilian evacuations in the Ukrainian cities of Kyiv, Mariupol, Kharkiv, and Sumy. According to the Interdepartmental Coordination Center for Humanitarian Response in Ukraine, the humanitarian conditions in these Ukrainian cities have extremely deteriorated. Major fast food and soda brands have suspended Russian operations. Pepsi and Coca-Cola each said they are suspending all advertising in Russia and stopping the sale of its drinks, while McDonald's and Starbucks have temporarily closed their stores and they've stopped shipment of products. And indeed, music brings people together. A young girl singing the localized version of Frozen's Let It Go in a bomb shelter in Ukraine has warmed the hearts of many.
Enthralled with her voice, the crowd of civilians even huddled and brought out their phones to capture the moment. Martha Smekova, who posted a now viral video, said in her caption that the little girl Amelia told her that she loves to sing and that she dreams of singing in front of an audience someday. Needless to say, Amelia fulfilled that dream as she made her first ever performance.
Smekova also added that even men in the shelter could not hold back their tears as the girl sang. The voice of the character Elsa in Frozen shared the video on her Twitter account and captioned it with "We see you" with blue and yellow hearts, the colors of the Ukrainian flag.
Не забудь, новый день он кажет путь. Не боюсь ничего уже. Пусть бы шум ничто, холод всегда мне был по душе.
I think our lesson for today is to be like kids and children. Don't forget to see the light in every situation and to keep it light. Actually, nakausap ko yung mga Ukrainian nung isang araw. Sabi nila, pag nakasmile sila, hindi naman ibig sabihin they take the situation lightly, but that's their way of keeping strong.
And the little things that we take for granted, where we get our strength, diba? When I saw that video and when I heard that song, noong una I didn't know that it was Let It Go. But then you hear it and you're thinking, that sounds familiar. I think I know that song. And really, the fact that the little girl now has her first global audience brings everybody together and really not just warms the heart, but really bring everybody to pray for what's happening in that part of the world.
Can we also sing Let It Go here with the rising fuel prices? Tawanan na lang natin. That wraps up today's big story. Catch us again tomorrow at 8 p.m. on Signal Channels 8 and 250.
Please like our Facebook page, One News. For more in-depth analysis, visit our webpage, onenews.ph. Mask on.
Wash hands.
And stay safe, Philippines. I'm Robbie Alampay.
I'm Gretchen Ho. We are One News. Have a good evening.